What up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans? Matty Peak here with another episode of Steelers War Room. I touch down under series Steelers War Room, all about putting in the minds of Omar Khan, Mike Tomlin, Andy Weidel, and the rest of the Steelers front office as they look to put together a winning roster in 2024 and beyond. All right, today we're cracking into draft prospects, leading draft prospects across all 3 days for the Steelers at two positions. That's right, we're going to give you two offensive positions, running back and tight end. Now, running back and tight end are two positions that a lot of Steel fans out there will say Steelers don't need that. But the Steelers may want choice about Najee Harris and him in his fifth-year option. I personally believe he doesn't deserve he doesn't deserve the fifth-year option. I don't think the fifth-year option is wise. I think they should try and sign him to a 2-year deal instead, 10, 11 million, right? Jaylen Warren is going into his third year. Then he'll be off contract as well next year. You know, they'll be having a look at, do they keep him? What do they do? Running backs are going to fall in this draft. There could be an opportunity to land someone, right? So particularly on day 3. So that's why running back. Why tight end? You know, you go, hang on, Matt. The Steelers have got Connor Haywood. The Steelers have got Darnell Washington. The Steelers have got Pat Freiermuth, who they want to re-sign by all accounts, and that wants to stay in Pittsburgh. He said, I want to retire a Steel. And they just went out and got Nicole Pruitt. We put out a video on the channel. I can link that in here as well. That's played with Arthur Smith at Tennessee and Atlanta. Plus, they have Rodney Williams, who was on the practice squad last year. Why would they need a tight end? Well, obviously, and I've said this all offseason since they announced Arthur Smith, I thought they needed another pass-catching tight end or an all-rounder tight end anyway. But obviously, tight ends are a part of Arthur Smith's game. That's why he's bringing in Nicole Pruitt. But Nicole Pruitt's not the biggest bloke out there, more of a red zone threat. While he's been productive when he's been used, he's not like a guy that can replace a Pat Freiermuth. I'm not saying you need to replace Pat Freiermuth, but Pat Freiermuth, even if you re-sign him, has had some big injuries. He's expected to do it all the time. We have no proof that Darnell Washington can catch the ball week in, week out in that same role. And Connor Haywood is limited by size and speed and some of the things he can do, but he's also very versatile because of his size, speed, and some of the things he can do. So I do think the tight end is more of a need than what some people think for the Steelers. But hey, if you think more about running back, just watch the running back part. If you think about you care more about the tight end part, you can skip ahead to the tight end part as well. But it is interesting to see these prospects because either position is going to have real value later on in this draft. There's like a couple of good top prospects, definitely a tight end. Everyone knows Brock Bowers. But then there's a lot of mid-round prospects and guys that will fall, and guys that will turn out to be very good players in the pros. So let's do running back first. I'll try and do it in about 5 minutes. If you do it, I want to skip ahead to tight end. But you should watch this because the Steelers may surprise you here, or you may want to know who's playing in the division. So overall, I don't have any running back going on day 1, round 1. I've got Jonathan Brooks and Blake Corum as my 2 definite day 2 guys. I also think that Braylon Allen could go on day 2 or 3. I think it's much more likely to go day 2. He's the youngest guy. He's the biggest in terms of weight guy in the class at 235 pound. In Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin, really big. I mean, hey, he could even go to the Packers. They could reunite with Braylon Allen. You know, don't be shocked to see that. Well, not reunite, but they could bring him back to the era. Then you've got Jalen Wright out of Tennessee, really productive player. He could be, I think he's a day 2 pick. I don't think he gets outside the 3rd. Worst case, it's very early on day 3. Then you've got Marshawn Lloyd, Audric Estime. I haven't had to pronounce his name, so I don't know if I got that right. Or it's Estime, I think. I think it's Estime. And then Kamani Vidal out of Troy. Now, Kamani Vidal out of Troy is someone I was regularly mocking late in drafts. But he's also risen up some boards as well as the draft process has gone on. But Marshawn Lloyd's a big back out of USC, 225 pounds. I think out of all the guys on my list, he's the 3rd heaviest on that list. Kamani Vidal's about 213, I think he tested at the combine. Estimate was 217, I think, at the combine. Blake Corum was 205 at the combine, but he was looking for a fast 40. He'll probably more playing weight, I think around 208 to 212. And Jalen Wright, I think, was 213 as well, if my memory... No, 210. My memory serves me correctly. So that's kind of interesting as well when you look at it from that perspective in terms of the weights and the sizes. Obviously, the Steelers play with a bigger back in Najee Harris, but he's looking like he's slimming down as well. So with that in mind, let's dive a little bit deeper into these players and some of their production. Why am I thinking that these guys could be worthy of being drafted? Now, you look at overall TDs for the year, 27 for Blake Corum. You saw that he destroyed it through the college football playoff. You've also got Audric Estime out of Notre Dame. I keep stuffing that up and apologize for that. He had 18 touchdowns. You had Kamani Vidal, who I mentioned, had 14 touchdowns, the guy on my list. Braylon Allen had 12 touchdowns. Marshall Lloyd had 9 touchdowns. And Frank Gore's kid could be someone that late in the draft as well. But I put my first 7 players that come to mind on my list across the 3 days in terms of the guys that I'd like to see drafted by the Steelers first. Carson Steele out of UCLA was hard to keep off that list. I will say that. Definitely. Jonathan Brooks out of Texas with 10 touchdowns. That was the name I was looking for. You look at overall running grade, Estime with a 94, Vidal with a 93.2. Again, he's been on my radar for like literally months. But I think, as I said, he had a decent combine and started to move up the boards. Jonathan Brooks with a 91.9. Jalen Wright with a 91.2. He only had 4 TDs for Tennessee, but he's a big play guy with over 1,000 yards rushing still. You look at Marshall Lloyd had a rushing grade of 87.2. And so on. But the thing about that, Blake Corum had one of 83.1. But you got to think about this in college. Running backs are really deeply used. So if you're really productive, you're scoring over touchdowns and yards like, Vidal and Estime, because Vidal had the most amount of yards out of all these guys. Like, you are going to have a high PFF grade. And not every fan out there likes PFF grades. So I'm not going to deeply, say that that's going to, do everything for you because it's really not. If you look at yards after contact, though, Vidal, Estime are up there. So is Jonathan Brooks. So is Braylon Allen. Again, it was hard not to put Bucky Irving on this list. Blake Corum's up there. These guys are really, really good. It's a good class. It's just like there's not someone that's absolutely breakaway like a Jamar Gibbs or a Bijan Robinson. It's just they just don't have those guys in the draft this year. If you look at, and that's the other thing too, is the run that'll happen on wide receivers as well. If you look at 10 plus yards, yards of 10 plus or more, pretty big there when you look at Kamani Vidal with 47 of those. Like, that's getting you a first down. Estime in there with 38. Frank Gore Jr., even though he's not on my list, is worth mentioning there. He's got 31 on there. So, these are guys, and we can go through. Blake Corum had like 25. Marshall Lloyd had 24. Braylon Allen had 24. Jonathan Brooks had 24. So definitely all the guys that we're talking about are guys that can play big, make big plays, 10 plus yards. They're guys that are getting a lot of yards as well, over 1,000 yards for almost, I think, it's every single one of the players that I mentioned, except for Braylon Allen, I think, and Jalen Wright. They're a lot of TDs apart from Jalen Wright. Yards per attempt was really high as well for most of them, like, Marshall Lloyd, like 7.1 yards, Jalen Wright, 7.4 yards. So, like, we're talking about really productive backs that are available late. So I'm just going to give you those names again as you're thinking about your mock drafts, as you're thinking about guys that go through the process. Again, Steelers are not going to draft in their first 2 or 3 rounds a running back. That is not going to happen. But if someone slips, don't be surprised, because then the Steelers have got options with Najee. They can see how he plays out the year. Then they've got options whether they can move Warren. I don't think they'll move Warren. But they could find an answer here and it get cheaper. Remember, Omar Khan is a numbers and analytics guy. I know Tomlin really likes Najee, but they got to pay a lot of guys. They got to still continue to get better. But Jonathan Brooks, Blake Corum, Braylon Allen, Jalen Wright, Marshawn Lloyd, Audric Estime, and Kamani Vidal. All right, so I think I kept it to 5 or 6 minutes, so I'm on schedule. All right, let's look at tight end. Straight out, we're going to look at tight end. Now, when I look at the tight ends, I could do a list of 9, 10 guys I quite like, actually, in this draft. Particularly because you put Brock Bowers there, but the Steelers, unless like he had a massive fall, the Steelers wouldn't draft him. And then you're pretty much forced to trade Pat Freiermuth, or there's a medical cloud with him. I just don't even think he gets to 20 with the Steelers, and the Steelers wouldn't trade up to go get Brock Bowers. I'd be highly, highly shocked if that were to occur, particularly with the other needs they have at cornerback and center and right tackle and wide receiver. It just doesn't make sense. But putting Brock Bowers there, Then you've got Jatavion Sanders, who I didn't fully love the measurables, the height and weight. I think it was 6'3" and 245 pounds at the combine. You got Ben Sinnott, 6'5". He's in the 240 to 250 pound range out of Kansas State. He is a guy that will go on day 2, a little bit higher for where the Steelers want to draft. Then you've got Jared Wiley, who will be drafted early day 3, late day 2, or even mid day 2, but he won't be there deep into day 3. Theo Johnson out of Penn State. Again, you could see him at the back end of day 2, but I think you're more likely going to see him in the 3rd. He had about 80% of the production of what Pat Freemuth had in college, both in terms of touchdowns and yards. So he had about 900 yards off the top of my head. I think he had 7 touchdowns last year, but we'll pull up those numbers in a second. Eric All out of Iowa, a very, very underrated tight end, I should say. He's been on my radar all college season. I've been talking about him and mocking him to the Steelers late in the draft all year round. If he goes to the Steelers, I'm saying I picked it because I just thought this guy just reeks of a Steelers tight end, just in terms of not necessarily he's not the best blocker out there, but he's the sort of guy that I think can make plays in the passing game, and he is a bigger bodied guy as well, which helps. He's also out of Iowa. There's been a lot of good guys out of Iowa, right? So when I think about when I do think about Eric All, I just kind of like the value he delivers, particularly if he somehow goes undrafted. And then you got a guy that had an awesome combine in Dallin Holker out of Colorado State. These guys were just really, really, really good in terms of like how they tested. And I really liked what he did on tape. Other names on this list are guys like Tanner McLaughlin out, I think it was Arizona State. You've also got guys like Tip Ryman. There's a few other blokes that kind of come on this list, but these are sort of the prime guys. So let's delve in a little bit deeper to these blokes. So you look at touchdowns overall. Now, tight ends aren't meant to score a deep amount of touchdowns. Jared Wiley had 8 last year. Pretty big from a guy who's 6'5". I think I've got him at 249 pounds. I think he tested 259 pounds as well. So, I mean, this is a bigger player. We're going to pull up his numbers there. 249 pounds. And he tested lighter than what I thought. I think he'll play more at the 250 to 255 pound range. 8 TDs last year. Theo Johnson had 7. So really productive year for him, averaging 10 yards per reception, 341 yards overall. Ben Sinnott had 6. Brock Bowers had 6. Cade Stover is someone that people might wonder why he's not on my list. And Cade Stover's not on my list because I think he'll go a little bit high. He is 6'4", and don't get me wrong, I do think he's a good prospect. I think he will be overdrafted, and I don't think he can be as productive as Brock in the NFL as Brock Bowers and Jatavion Sanders out of Texas. And so I kind of left him out for that reason. I wanted to give you guys a name that I thought could do it across both, a day 2 and day 3 guys. And I do think Jared Wiley will be drafted higher than what a lot of people have him at the moment. And a lot of people have him as like a fairly early day 3, 4th, even 5th round pick. But I think Wiley's being underrated because he's a decent blocker. When you also look at Tanner McLaughlin, he had 4 out there. I know he's not on my list, but he is worth mentioning because, as I said, he almost made it. Tip Ryman had the 3 that I mentioned. Eric Hall only had 3 touchdowns, but he caught 61% of his passes. He caught average reception was 14.2, 299 yards. He had a decent grade out there as well. I would say he's a later pick than a lot of the guys we've talked about so far. Anyway, he's value late, as I mentioned. Look at overall offensive grade. I know a lot of people don't like it out there. I know they don't like Pro Football Reference, but I'm just going to show it. 84.4 for Brock Bowers, Ben Sinnott 82, Jatavion Sanders 75.6, Eric All 72.4. We briefly talked about Tanner McLaughlin there. Dallin Hooker is 68.5. Jared Wiley is 68 flat. You look at the pass blocking grades. Now, again, I know people don't love pass blocking grades, but there's no other way to get an idea of like pass blocking in terms of a measurement perspective. Pro Football Reference don't do this at the college level with their sports reference product. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, though, because most of the guys that I've talked to you about don't have that good a pass blocking grade. But there's a bunch of guys in college that play tight end that are more like big fullbacks, H-backs. There's guys that are athletic tackles, guys that will convert to tackles later on in their college career or even trying to enter into the NFL. So it is a little bit more ambiguous when you're looking at pass blocking grades. But Ben Sinnott, I think, had the best overall pass blocking grade out of the guys that we've talked about. Brock with a 72.8. Brock Bowers had a 72, so he's pretty close. Jared Wiley is 71.1. Holker had a 69.4. Tam McLaughlin, we mentioned a couple of times now, 69. He's probably the 8th guy. I should have put him on the list. Cade Stowe had a 68 as well. Then a few guys fall into the next page. So there are some guys we mentioned that are pretty good, right? And they're all within 4 or 5 of each other, all within sort of 5% of this actual grade. If that makes it easy to understand, they're all pretty close in terms of what they're going to do. Now, in terms of overall targets, Holker had the most amount of targets, so he's used to getting the ball, right? But this is where it's interesting. I picked these players based on what I've seen tested, without going deep into their results, with draft profiles I've read on all of them from different places. But look at the guys on my list. I gave you 7 guys, 7 names, and 5 of them, all 5 of those 7. Now, Brock Bowers, maybe, okay, that's a gimme. So let's say, take that guy out. 4 out of 6 are in the top 5 for the most amount of targets they had. And this is the difference that I wanted to mention. Theo Johnson's number 16, so we're missing him. And then we'll have to go down to Eric Hall was 28th. And then Tip Ryman would be 24th, right? So I know I didn't. He was actually on my list. I swapped him out for Dalen Holker in the end because I feel better about Holker as a prospect. But, and I was pre-looking at these stats. But the ultimate point I was making before was that and I know we looked at blocking grades, but I do think the Steelers, if they're going to go tight end, need someone that can catch the football. They need to be someone used to getting a lot of targets. Now, there is no way, even if the Steelers draft a tight end in this draft, that this guy, that's one of these guys is going to get 50 targets. I don't see that, right? It's probably more like 30 targets max. But you want to know that they've produced in college. It's like when we talked about wide receiver on yesterday's show. You can go back and look at that one as well. Your last year of college production is usually a really good signal in terms of the production that you can have in the NFL. And so this is why I think it's really important that we look at these guys that have proven production. And that is why I was so pleased when I pulled this up right before I did the show, and I was pulling up the tight end window and I was searching through a couple of key metrics. And to see that was really important. Now, obviously, this translates pretty much to receptions, except for the fact that Brock Bowers was way down on the list at 19, but he had a much higher reception rate and catch percentage at 78.9% for the passes that he was able to catch. So, again, we've got 4 of the top 7 guys, 5 of the top 6 guys as equal Jadavion Sanders is with Tam McLaughlin, who keeps advocating through these numbers that why I probably should have put him there as the 8th bloke. But Derek Johnson's down there as well. So most of the guys I've talked about are guys that are getting receptions, not just targets, they're getting receptions. Now, their percentage catch rate is going to differ guy to guy, but these are guys that essentially have really produced while they've been at the college level, really produced. And so when you are thinking about the Steelers drafting these 2 positions, it's going to be on maybe earliest day 2 if it's tight end, probably on day 3. There is real value at these positions because of how high teams are going to have to draft a number of other positions. But you let me know in the comments, is there a tight end you like? Is there a running back you like? Is there one of these positions you absolutely don't want the Steelers draft? I know people are very set on positions they do or don't want. Or are you really open to best player available? Because there could be some real BPA picks in this draft later in the mid rounds. And on offense, that's really a tight end at running back. They're actually deeper in the mid rounds than wide receiver, if you're thinking 3 and below. But yeah, you let me know in the comments. As always, go Steelers.